Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 486 of the Dead Robot Society. Terry Mixon here. Joining me, Paul E. Cooley. How you doing, man?
I don't know.
Wait a
I'll
minute.
get back to you on that.
That totally did not sound like you felt it. Give us some of that with some real feeling in there. That's much better.
Was that better?
That
Probably
totally
more
better.
accurate too.
What are you up to, dude?
Well, apparently I'll be going to see an orthopedist and maybe having surgery because my MRI came back with, holy shit, you tore your meniscus. Oh, goody. So I may have to go get that fixed.
Did the doctor actually say, holy shit?
No.
Because that would be awesome.
I'm an author. I dramatize everything. That's just part of what I do.
I could just totally see the doctor coming in and going, oh my God. And you freak it out.
The nurse was like, we looked at your MRI and yeah, you have a torn meniscus. I'm thinking, what kind of torn meniscus? But she didn't say. At least my
meniscus.
meniscus. Just for Scott Pond. She did say my MCL and my ACL are okay, so all that's fine. Yeah, no bone chips or anything like that. But I got to go see the specialist, so I got to make that appointment. Thank you. Apart from that, been mainly working on getting some things fixed in this draft of Garrett's Inferno, writing down more notes, and I started like 2 or 3 more stories that are just, they were there, so I started them, and I'm sure I'll be writing them more fully very, very soon. And in between that, of course, working on the 4th Derelict book. I keep wanting to say the 3rd Derelict book, but that's out. Oh, and Terry has seen the cover art for Destruction.
Ooh, is it pretty?
I sent it to you, you doof.
I know, but I'm asking for theatrical purposes here. I've seen it, yes.
Oh, it's pretty.
I have to agree. It's awesome.
So I had to have them change a couple things with put more shadow behind some of the words. They're easier to read, but they did a hell of a job, and I can't wait to do a cover reveal on that. Really excited for it. Plus it basically gives you the feel of the end of the book. So I'm really excited about that. I'm still waiting to hear back from my beta readers. I got like another week and a half, I think. And then we'll start to clean up. And I've already got something I know I need to clean up a little bit more at the beginning. So it's all progress, man. It's all progress. It's all progress.
Hey, progress is an exceptionally good thing.
Yes, it is. So basically, yeah, I'm the hamster running on the wheel right now. That's about it. That's all I got to say. Except, if you haven't seen Altered Carbon, Terry was right. Altered Carbon, good. I'm going to now binge on the audiobooks and see how it compares. So we'll see. But it was a really good show. You should check it out.
Yay! I get one right.
You got one right. After all this time, you got one right.
That's okay. We'll see if I can get 2 in a row by recommending Lost in Space next month.
You know, it was really funny. I was listening to Hollywood Babylon with Kevin Smith and whatever his partner is on there. His name I can't remember. And they have a segment with "We Don't Need This, We Already Got One," and his co-host mentioned the Lost in Space thing, and was like, "All they do is they walk around. It's Lost in Space. Some of the shit needs to take place in fucking space. Why isn't that in any of the trailers?" I was like, it's a really interesting point, but I think you're going overboard there, Ralph, because that trailer looked pretty badass to me. So it doesn't look like it's going to be a complete. It looks like it's going to be true to some of the original elements, but they've definitely dumped some things.
If you ever watched the original, looking at what do you call it, Dr. Smith in the pilot episode versus the rest of the series was really an amazing switch, because in the pilot, he was your dark and competent assassin, spy, killer. Boy, that went out the window really fast.
I don't think I've ever seen the pilot. I don't think I've ever seen it. Wow, that's a scary thought. What was that, in the 60s? Is that show in the 60s or 70s?
I don't think it was the 60s. I think it was the 70s, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I just can't remember. Oh, well. Anyway, that aside, yes, I will probably give the first episode of that a watch. So we'll see. But what about you, man? What's going on?
I have my writing room back, as you can tell by looking over my shoulder. So now I can actually produce something without having my wife sitting behind me doing wifely things at her computer. Yeah, that look on your face. Uh-huh.
I'm just trying. Well, okay. I'm when you say doing wifely things, all sorts of really horrible images floated through my mind because so many of them were stereotypical. And I don't know what kind of household you have. And I had no idea what we're talking about. When we say wifely things, that is a very loaded term. I don't know what any of it means. Which is fine. I don't need to know.
That's fine. That's right. You don't need to know.
Just
imagine inside that sick little mind of yours what goes on in her office.
I'm just telling you that the term is loaded. That's all I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've started writing on a new project, so I've got 1,000 words done on that, getting things in motion. But I've got another project that I'll be writing on in a week or two. So it's going to be a mixed bag. We'll just see if I can keep everything together.
Well, that should be good. Yeah, you'll have no problem. You just need to stop sleeping. You'll be fine. No?
Yeah, that's it. No, that's not going to work for me.
That just
Other than that, things are going great. All the housework is done, and so things are getting back to normal. I've got a freezer delivery at the end of this month, so I've got to clean out part of the garage. So that'll be exciting. But other than that, my life is back to normal.
Yay!
Yay!
So back to crazy kittens running around and Terry locking himself in his office and having Minnie, the office cat, occasionally come over and scritch him for lovin's and things like that.
Yep. And Romeo is out and about, so we're dealing with getting him integrated. And it's going well. He's integrating fine, although he's got some really sharp front claws that he's occasionally fond of using on me.
Yeah, sounds like a cat to me. I have 2 of them. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a little bit more than that. When he gets annoyed, he'll grab.
And Shadow will grab you just by for you walking by him. Yeah, that's how my arms look, only they're not quite as pale. You need to get some sunlight, dude.
Yeah, maybe we need to see the outdoors a little bit here. Yeah. No, but yeah, I'm a cat owner. I'm a cat slave, basically. So I'm used to this. But he doesn't want to have people touch his paws. He doesn't want to be held. Trimming is not exactly an option, so we're going to have to consider what's long-term for him as far as trying to keep him from destroying everything, including us, and not terrorizing by trying to trim him.
No, the joys
Exactly
of being
so.
a cat owner.
We will figure this all out.
Yeah.
Speaking of figuring things out, I think that we should jump right into the show, man.
Jump right into the show. What is today's show about?
Right into it. I've already forgotten.
You've already forgotten. I had something.
If I didn't write it down, it didn't happen.
Had something to do with Why's My Line.
Yeah, I seem to remember you saying that, but I've already forgotten it.
Let's talk about the things that would tell us exactly why Terry would do something.
Good. I'd love to know the answer to that. Let's jump right into it. So tell me, Paul, have you ever seen those movies where they talk about the actor goes up to the director and says, "What's my motivation?" Have you ever seen that particular stereotype?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And having studied the Stanislav method and Stanislavski method in college, I'm well aware of these things.
Wait a minute. That's got to be confusing. The Stanislav method and the Stanislavski? Wait a minute. Hang on.
It's Stanislavski, not Stanislav.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute. They're like almost brothers already. And they both have a method that's involved with what? What?
In fact, there's a couple of books out there that I may have somewhere, but I don't know if I still have them. But there were a couple of them talking about what writers can learn from, how actors work, how actors and directors function, how they actually put a play together, and all those kinds of things, and into thinking about how you deal with characters.
For the longest time, when I was writing at the beginning of this, and even up to my most recent book, I sometimes get too lost in the plot of what I'm doing to give the character motivations enough emphasis in what's going on, to get down into the characters' heads and have that be the driving force that drives the plot. And I had to stop. I was reading an indie author's work this weekend that I'm not going to name, and I got a third of the way into it, and I said, I just cannot continue on.
I can't connect with any of these people.
I can't connect with any of the characters. It's not got any real depth to it. It's too superficial, and it's just marginally. If it was just marginally better, I could have kept on, but it was right at that thing, and it fell just a little bit short, and I stopped it. And I feel sad for that, because I think the premise of this series that the guy's written is good, and it's probably going to get better as it goes along, but I could not force myself to keep going, because while the characters had supposed motivation, we weren't in the character's head to the point to where it felt real.
So it felt like a disembodied camera where you're not getting anything from anybody.
The characters felt artificial because it wasn't deep enough. It felt like I knew I was reading. That's my problem.
Okay.
Rather than enjoying the story, I couldn't get past the fact that I knew I was reading a story. It's a very subtle sort of thing, but it's real. If you can't pull the reader in enough to where they lose the fact that you are telling them a story and they just read and are part of the story, are involved with the story, then you can lose the reader. And that's the first time in a while I've took a chance on someone because I thought it was going to be good enough, and I actually lost out.
Well, it is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. I'm sure the author is going to do just fine without me. So nothing negative about that. There are other books going on with that. I'm sure that everything's going to be fine.
Everything will be fine.
It certainly does make it so that we should talk about how we can tell a story with the characters' motivations actually driving the plot as opposed to the plot driving the characters.
Okay.
In a lot of these stories, sometimes the plots do drive the characters to a degree. Nature survival, you're running from the volcano, things like that. The black is chasing you down the hallway. Things like that, the plot can actually drive the characters to a degree, but you've got to show the character and actually have realistic motivation for what they're doing and why they're doing it so that the reader loses themselves in the story, or you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to pass on exactly how you go about doing that. But before I start, I've got some ideas on that, but I want to get your thoughts on that phenomenon first.
I think there are some people out there who have complained that the first book in the series, as well as the first book in the Derelict saga, was too slow. And I think the reason is the way I wrote them that way, and I know it is with Derelict. I had to set up all this different stuff because I had to get you to know these characters, to know why they would do what they're going to do later. So I had to plant these things, and there's no other way to plant them than spending time in the character's head, getting to know who this character is, getting to know the adversity that they face in every day in their lives before you throw them into the wood chipper. And I love those moments of spending time with them as a writer, but I think they are also necessary if you're setting up something where you want, folks to like the characters and care about them. They have to know about these people. They have to know why these, if there's tension between characters, they need to know why that is. They need to understand what that tension is. And you can have so much fun as a storyteller by telling the events or giving insight into how one person experienced a set of events and what they thought about it versus what another person who they have tension with thought about those, thinks about those events, what happened, and how they remember them, and how they think what the other character's motivation is. Because suddenly it makes somebody who's an utter and complete asshole, it gives you insight into why they're an asshole and what it is they believe. And then you have this area where the reader is wondering who is correct, whose viewpoint is the real one. And you can have a lot of fun in that space. And that makes that kind of stuff really, really grabs me as a reader, because I want to see when they all get dropped into the broiler, exactly what happens. I want to see that, because that is half the fun of this stuff. It's not just, what monster is around the corner or anything, or, what madman is sitting there, or what their motivation is. It's all these other things with these people that have to work together to solve whatever the problem is. It's all the stuff that happens between them and how they are affected and what decisions they make. And that is a big deal for driving plot.
Mm-hmm. Christine Catherine Rush, I heard something that her husband, Dean Wesley Smith, said, is that when she's getting ready to write in a new universe or whatever, she doesn't start writing the novel. She'll write either short stories or scenes or snippets of the characters until she gets a feel for who they are before she even starts writing the novel that includes them, because she needs to know who the people are that she's dealing with, so that they don't. The way I used to say it is that when I start writing a character, it develops like a negative in the water. It slowly fades into view.
Right.
And you really don't want that to happen. You'd really actually prefer to have immersion happen much faster and the character not change from what you've got at the beginning. Their motivations, the way I see it, I use the metaphor of a golf swing. The story arc is, you got the backstory where you do the backswing, and then you've got the driving force, and the actual novel starts the moment the club hits the ball and sends it rocketing down the fairway. Everything that happened before that moment is what causes the ball to behave in exactly the way that it is once the strike takes place. You may not see that backswing in the story, but you have to feel it. You have to know that it was there in a way that is angling the story. So those details are going to come into play as the story is told out. And being able to immerse your characters in their environment and make them real to the reader so that they are driving the plot rather than the other way around makes it an experience where they're not reading, where they're just part of the story. Yeah. And I think that's really critical. One of the ways that I think you can do it, I'm taking Dean Wesley Smith's depth course, his workshop at this particular moment, and it tangentially feeds into what I'm talking about here. Basically, that course boiled down is starting your stories just a little bit with immersing the character in the setting. The five senses filtered by the character, by the character's emotions and perceptions as told to the reader, is what you do to pull your reader into the story, so they're not looking at a cardboard piece. And it may only take a couple of 100 words to do that. I wrote a little snippet of a guy going down into a sewer, describing how the rusty rungs on the ladder, his boots, the water, how the sound was, the smell, the feel of the walls under his gloves where they were kind of slimy, how the floor was slick underneath. And I wrote that right before he found something in the sewer. And well, in this case, you laugh. It wasn't a monster. It was a baby in a little floaty, a live baby. So that was the thing. He said, write a character name, whatever. And at the end of the snippet, he has to find a baby. So that's what I wrote. And it did the job of introducing the character with his environment filtered through his own perceptions and retold to the reader colored by his own perceptions. Correct. And that's what you've got to have with the backstory bled into it. You've got to know who these people are. And that's not saying to make a character sketch like your character sheet in playing D&D. You just need to have an idea of who the people are. And that's how you start the whole character motivation. That's the beginning.
I can't remember which Flannery O'Connor story it is, but she starts it with I may have told this story before or said this. The story is a son taking his mother to the hospital or some bullshit. I don't remember. But she's talking in racist slang and everything else, and not really all that complicated grammar. And he's listening to this, making comments on it in his mind. But then she starts to get sick. And the more ill she gets, the more he begins to mimic her behavior when she was strong. And so his vocabulary slowly debilitates as well. And you can read the story and make of it what you will, or what her intent was, but it's an interesting little experiment as to whether or not you pick it up. But if you're looking for it and if you notice it, because it starts to feel weird, because you get dragged down from a rather educated point of view, and it slowly starts to fall apart. And so I find that really interesting from that kind of perspective. And obviously, if you can add, those kinds of details into your work, by all means, do it. But I thought it was a really interesting way to deal with this character depth, especially in a short story. It is a good way to do things. When you were talking about Christine Catherine Rush writing short stories for things, I know that at least 3 of my books have started out because of one scene with one character doing or witnessing one thing. And all it took was that one moment, that scene, to make me want to figure out how it happened. And for that, I need to know who the character is, what motivates them to get to that point. And so that has a lot to do with filling in the backstory, what these folks are, but also you have to make the characters real to the reader, and for the reader to give a crap. Otherwise, nothing else is going to work. Nothing else is going to matter. You have to care for the character for you to actually do horrible things to them and have the reader not go, meh. That's the whole point.
But I was going to look up something that you were telling the story of this story. I'm listening to an audiobook called The Immortals, and I can't remember who the author is, and I was going to go to Amazon and looking it up. That's where I got my little spyware attack.
Oh, nice.
But the story starts off with a woman who is been hired to protect another woman who's being abused. And so her job is to catch the abuser when he shows up and to really mess him up and make sure that he never comes back.
Okay.
And as the story develops, it's all about the environment that she's in, the street where she's waiting, how she's watching him approach, all that she's hearing, all that she's seeing. And it's slowly, as the story is developing and she's dealing with him, you realize that this woman is something special, or she used to be. At one time, thousands of years ago, she was the goddess Artemis. But all the Olympians left Olympus and entered our world and left their homeland, and they've slowly become weaker over the centuries until she's just barely more than a regular human being at this point in time. And how they go about telling how she feels about it and what she thinks about it, how she compares it to how she used to be, is a wonderful way of drawing the reader in, because even when it's, something wild, like saying, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the bruise on my face from that fight would have already healed. But now I'm starting to see gray in my hair. All of the things are filtered through her personality, her own perceptions, her own opinions. And those things in turn drive her motivation for what she's doing.
I still have a line bouncing around my head from years ago. And I tried to write the story and didn't know where it was going. It just didn't work. But I want to try again, because the line is this: the worst part about waking up dead is the smell.
There you go. That'll really hook you.
Now, the smell part, you could change it to stench. You could change it to malodorous odor. You could change it to all these different things. But the thing is, how you put that last word, that last word, or add a descriptor, is going to set up the voice for what the reader is going to expect.
It sets the tone.
It sets the tone immediately. And if you, just like in Dresden, Yes, I set the Walmart on fire or whatever else.
The Walmart was on fire and I wasn't to blame, or some such nonsense.
Yeah, something like that. When you see a line like that, you know immediately the kind of jackass you're going to be dealing with.
That's sort of the Walmart was on fire and it wasn't my fault.
It wasn't my fault.
It sets the tone because you know that plenty of other things probably are his fault.
Yeah, that wasn't my fault. So it just drags you in. It gets you into the character's head immediately just based on that. And then you as the writer have the obligation and the joy and the character's misery of explaining exactly what the hell that statement relates to.
Mm-hmm. The one of the things I only had a little dialogue in that intro piece, and it was one of the guy's coworkers calling down is, "Be careful of the alligator," and him muttering, "That's funny." He muttered, "The first 1,000 times." So I set the tone of who he was in just one short sentence that started the tone of who he was.
Yeah. The other thing is the fact that character said it under his breath, that last part, as opposed to just glaring at him and saying it out loud to the other character, also indicates something of relationship between them.
It does.
And that kind of stuff, it just adds so much color to the personal relationships and can give you an idea, you as the reader, that, okay, if I know that if this character bumps into this character again, we're going to have that kind of repartee and that kind of deal. And then, of course, when the shit hits the fan, if those two characters involved, when is that fear of saying that thing or being embarrassed to, say something in return to them? When does that suddenly break? And then we have a reverse relationship there. It's that kind of thing that I love about dealing with the psychological aspects of characters, is to set that up, what their limitations are, or maybe what their routine is, and then showing it dissolve completely or get just shattered, blown apart, and how they put it back together. It's just a lot of fun to do that with characters, especially in group situations where you set up those kind of dynamics.
Yep. Once you've got the character started, once you've got them firmly in mind, once the story starts and the plot starts intruding, you have to keep in mind that the reader needs to feel the character's motivation as what's happening.
Right.
And using Dresden as our earlier example, when something happens that drives him to take a certain action or to do something during that story, it is crystal clear and filtered through his character what's going on that actually drives his motivation to do what he's doing.
Right.
You can't just write a story where character X is flying a space fighter and shooting up stuff and doing this. Why? Why is that character doing that? Better yet, why does he feel that he needs to do that? What's he thinking? What's going on? Get down in the character's head and filter the events through his objective personality.
That's what made the beginning of Starship Troopers kind of awkward for me. It quickly recovered, but we find him in this suit and with shit going on around it, but we have no idea what's in his head.
I hate flashbacks and one of the reasons I may hate flashbacks so much, especially in a book like that, is you're seeing the character further on and you have no time to attach to that character, and it's a false sense of drama. That's a sign of weak storytelling in my mind. I
think so too, but flashbacks also, I like to try and set the detail without the flashbacks. In Gears Inferno, Amy is scarred up. She tries to hide her scar with her bangs and everything else, but we don't uncover. We mention what caused those scars, but we don't go into any detail. Then later on, we go into detail, but we do that through just regular storytelling narrative, not really a flashback per se. But I set it up. The thing is, I didn't set it up in the flashback. I set it up long before we talked about what the history was. But I needed those details set up at the very beginning, and how I handled it was basically make it part of her life. And that was actually a very useful device.
In this particular case, I'm talking about one of the crime dramas, starting out with something happens here, something's going on here, and then it goes 18 hours earlier. No, no.
You know, when they do that,
Especially at the beginning, you've got to start with where you are. Don't start with something and then flashback. That's weak storytelling.
unless there are two different pieces, two different stories going side by side. So they're related. And Stephen King's It did this. Where basically
You're going to use him as an example of what people should do?
Now, I will say
nobody even knows his name.
What he does before he shows any of the stuff that happened before, and it's not written as flashbacks. It's really not. Most of it's not anyway. There's a thin frame around what you would call flashbacks, but the bottom line is it acts like two separate books. It really does. That works really well. He could have told those stories in order. He could have done that, but it would have broken all the suspense and fractured the way the book works on when you get to the last third. So it was the perfect. I think it was the perfect choice to do that. And I think when I go to Tony Downs, that's exactly how I'm going to do that story too, because it's necessary to do it that way.
All mocking of Stephen King aside, he is a master storyteller. And when we try to do what he does, we probably don't do it as well.
But the fact that we're trying to look at those things and incorporate them means that we're at least self-aware.
That's the start.
And, you know, we talked about this before too. We don't want to write the same book every time.
No, although some people make quite a living writing the same book every time.
Yeah, well, as long as it's fun. I can't do it if it's just a job. It has to be fun. It has to be mine. I have to feel like I put my stamp on it. I can't just write the same formulaic story over and over again.
So let's get into the nitty gritty here, Paul.
There's nitty gritty?
There is nitty gritty.
Is there like a product you can buy at the store to clean that off?
I bet you if you look it up online, there's something named nitty gritty. I bet you.
I'm not even going to go to the internet right now. There's no telling what that will pull back.
Some things you can't unsee.
Some things you can't unsee. That is correct.
So when you've got in mind, how do you actually get the character motivation that you have in your mind into the black squiggly marks on the screen? How do you actually translate your thoughts and the full way that you see the story in your head into something that's going to filter through your words into the reader's mind? Use your mind control technique and control the reader's minds right now.
Controlling meters. You're asking me to perform on short notice?
You're lucky I don't have you write an essay right now.
Freaking hell. Yeah. We're gonna live broadcast Paul's typos. No, thank you. No, thank you. I have editors for a reason. And even they can't catch all of my crapola. How do I control the reader's brains? I have to give the character something to do. In fact, I often tell backstory or show backstory, I hope, while the character is doing something mundane. But it's part of that scene sequel thing, is it's a sequel to something that may or may not have happened recently. But the bottom line is now I got the character doing something and now I get them to reflect on it. And I try and get something like that in real early, especially when I introduce all of the main characters. I want them to have that moment because it makes it very simple for people to understand who these people are. And it makes it very simple for them to understand how they may interact in the future. You know, why is he dragging me? Why is there this going on and this going on and this going on? And then suddenly they all kind of collapse on one another and you're going, oh, okay, that's why he introduced that character early. It's especially important if it's a main character. I think you try and do those things as much as possible early. And give them those moments. I want to know who these people are. I want to know why should I spend the hours, or why should I plan on spending hours with these people? You got to give me a reason. There's got to be some strange quirk with them, or something's going on, or something they say, or whatever. Give me a reason to want to read about these people. And it's just like, you have that friend that you kind of can't live without. Well, what about them what makes them so special? What makes them unique? What are the kinds of things that they would say in certain situations if you put this up? What anecdotes have you heard? about people doing things, crazy anecdotes. It gives you the sense of who those people are if you put those kinds of things in there. And sometimes with my characters, I already know what that event's going to be. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes they are trying to do something else, but I need to convey a piece of information. Therefore, I need to put stuff in about the backstory. So whatever they're doing needs to remind them of something else.
While we were telling that particular story that way, I just had a vision of a series that I'll never write, mind you, of someone that their job is to clean up crime scenes, the bloody remnants of a crime scene. And as they're cleaning it, they're struck by flashbacks of what happened during the crime. They actually see visions of the real crime. And the question that popped into my mind is, why are you still doing that job? What in the world would you still be doing this? So obviously they must be looking to contribute in a way to find the criminals that can't be caught. There's got to be a reason that they're doing something that
it can't just say it's my job.
X is doing this really terrible thing that he loathes. Why is he doing it?
Right.
Not just telling us why he's doing it. Make it clear through him why he's doing it.
In The Expanse, in the book, the first book, you get this rundown detective, alcoholic, broken marriage, whole freaking 9 yards, guy who's basically fighting for some reason to exist. And that sets up a really good dynamic. You get kind of depressed whenever you're around this guy, but it sets it up to where you understand why he latches on to this one particular thing, this one particular case that he's told to let go of over and over again. And it doesn't become about any kind of responsibility. He falls in love with the character that it's about. And he feels like he finally has something that gives his life meaning. And that's why he's so tenacious and willing to die for it, is because he's been looking for something that makes sense. And it's the only thing that he could find on such short notice that require him to liquidate his bank account and get the hell off the station he's on. And they set that up really well. It worked out perfectly because it just interleaved with the plot. But we got to know him through why did his marriage dissolve? Why is he drinking? Why are all these things happening to this guy? And it works out well. You get to really, really like him.
Good. I've seen the first half of the first season of The Expanse, and it looked like it was really, really grabby. The one that I've seen recently that feels that way to me, oh God, what is the name of that show? Oh, well, it's the one that people were comparing. It's kind of, never mind. I can't think of it. My brain is not working. I can't come up with the connections. I can't come up with the connections.
Wow.
It's the one that I compared to Blade Runner. It was done as a TV series released on Netflix that did cyberpunk future reality so much more intimately than Blade Runner 2049 felt to me.
Altered Carbon or whatever it's called.
Altered Carbon. That's the one. We watched all 10 episodes of Altered Carbon, and that started off with just a glimpse of the character in his past, and you really didn't know that much about him, but you knew enough to hook you. And as it went on, you got enough of who he was to drive his motivation. At first, he didn't want to be involved in anything that was going on. He said, just take my mind back out of this thing and put me back away forever. I have no desire to exist at all. Why was he so nihilistic? That's what you wondered. And then somebody tried to kill him. So after he was offered a job to hunt up a murderer and he was going to refuse it, somebody tried to kill him. And so he decided to take that job. And every episode pretty well illuminated some aspects of his past while doing something in the future that enhanced your understanding of his character motivation. Why is he doing the things that he's doing? They said he was a terrorist when it first started out. What did that even mean? And as the story goes on, you find out what that means. And maybe it's not so terroristic after all. So it was a very interesting expose in how to go ahead and illuminate character and character motivation while telling a rocking good story. It was pretty dark, though. Pretty dark if you're if you're looking at humanity and saying, God, there's nothing worth it in the future. That's terrible. Who would want to live like that? Have you seen Altered Carbon?
Oh, I have not seen it yet.
Watch the first episode. At some point in the next couple of weeks, watch the first episode, because I do want to hear what you think about it. You don't have to watch anything else. Just give it a try. Okay. I want to hear what your opinion of the storytelling is.
I will. I was just going to mention there's a book called The Grand Master by Warren Murphy and Molly Cochran of Destroyer fame that I read in the 80s. And it's about two chess masters. And they're basically yin and yang to one another. And it's a really interesting book. I probably ought to read it again. It's been too darn long. It's only $3.99 on Amazon. But you get these glimpses of who the story is told in the present, but it's again switching to the past thing. And then the characters are reflecting upon those past things in their present. But we would not understand the dynamic and the way these guys are each other's nemesis. We would not understand why that is without that information. And they slowly reveal it. They kind of ramp you up at first, and then it just kind of contracts a little bit. And you understand that each of them have this shadowy existence figure in their past. And one of them thinks he's defeated the other one, and the other one is defeated. And that's how they start out, that's the position they're in. And then it will slowly flip. But it's stuff like that really gets you into the character, really gets you into understanding why they're going to do what they're going to do later on. And I think, it's very important to set that up. One of the things that really ticked me off about the movie Aliens is they chose in the cinematic cut of the movie to excise the portions where she talks about the fact that she had a daughter when she went on this little journey in Alien.
That kind of is important.
It makes it a big deal. Well, they mention her daughter, but they don't show the actual scene where they talk about what happened to her daughter. They don't show all these different things about it. They just kind of mention it in passing, and they don't really go into it. And it causes a problem because it makes it, if you include that information in there, the way she latches onto Newt makes so much more sense, because now you see this maternal side kind of coming forward, and you can understand this replacement. And you understand her motivation. I'm not going to let that child die because I never got to know mine. It's that kind of deal. And of course, it's also maternal instinct if you want to boil it down to it. But it gives a human reason beyond that for why this person is doing what they're doing and how they're behaving. Which I think is an awesome way to do stuff. And I can't believe they cut it out. Just cannot believe it.
Sometimes when people are making movies, you really wonder what the heck were they thinking?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's like, okay, well, we're going to address that 5-minute scene by putting in this 10-second, adding this 10 seconds to dialogue. And it's like, okay, I understand why you did that, because you felt you had to cut the movie down, but that was kind of the wrong thing to cut. And there were some other things that were in the director's cut, which could have been cut, but aren't, because I think there were bad dialogue, bad acting, and everything else. But they're there, and they actually explained a few things that they didn't cover in anything else, like the weapons they're carrying. Because then suddenly you find out about these things, and you have no idea. Well, they just pulled that out of their ass. You didn't know they were in existence. So there's little details like that they cut that when you come back to it, were actually kind of big, and would have helped explain quite a few things that you're kind of left wondering about.
Well, it's a balancing act. You don't want to overload the reader with putting who the character is in the story, unless of course you write literary fiction where that seems like that's mandatory. Plot is optional, characterization is mandatory.
Characterization is always mandatory. Action, not so much.
I kind of insist that you have some action too. There needs to be something going on. Don't sit around your coffee table for the entire novel talking, please.
What is
please.
wrong with you? Long Day's Journey into Night, one of the best plays ever written. And
This is my disbelieving look.
Oh, it's a fantastic, fantastic play. It will break your heart, though. It will just crush your human spirit into pieces and grind
That sounds like literary fiction right there. Yes, it does.
Yeah, I commit literature on occasion, I'm told.
It's a balancing act, is where I went. Where it's
yeah,
going
where
with
you
this
were.
year's.
Yes.
When you're telling your story, you've got to find the right balance between letting the reader know who the character is and the environment that they're in, with actually having them do something that's going to be interesting to the reader. And that's dependent on your target audience.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of that rolled together is your character motivation as applied to your story. And the only way you're going to get that really good is practice, 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 practice.
I mean, the easiest way and the most blatant way to do it, and if you do it right, nobody's going to care anyway, is show that person doing their job and have something happen and have them react to it. Or coming back from the job and having something happen on the way home, something along those lines. Because it's a really simple way to get a feel for who that character is in hell of a hurry.
There's a movie that I don't remember the title of it, where some everyman that's working in a cubicle farm somewhere is driving and stuck in traffic and finally just loses his shit. And
falling down.
That's the one.
Michael Douglas. Yeah.
Just loses his shit.
Well, he's been losing his shit for a while. It was just the last freaking straw. Yeah, he was insane. Totally nuts. Yeah, it's a great movie for that kind of deal where you can just see the stress and the tension just rise around him and try and imagine all the thoughts that are running through his head. And we get that by the particular things we see, like the road sign that's flashing, whatever, accident, or I can't even remember what it is, or heat warning, whatever. And then they show the temperature on his dash. And then they show some license plate or bumper sticker that is rather ironic in this situation. They show him noticing these things. And it just immediately drags you into, holy shit, something really bad's about to go down. But you get to know that this person, just from the way he looks, is already on the verge of something. And then you start showing all the little things that are aggravating his mood and aggravating him. And now you're kind of like, okay, I know where this guy's at because I've been there before. I've been at that moment in traffic where you're just ready to kill everybody. And it's not just because you're in a intersection or you're in a traffic jam. It's because you're sitting there pissed off about everything that happened to you that day at work. You're just going through your mind, or maybe you're going through the mind, all the things you did wrong at the job, and you're kicking yourself. And then on top of it, you're stuck in this goddamn traffic jam. There's nothing on the radio but commercials, and everything's horrible. And you just want to jump out of the car, tear off all your clothes, and run naked across the tarmac.
If you're driving and you can tear off all your clothes and run across the tarmac, you're not driving in the right place.
If you're in a traffic jam, you're not driving anywhere.
It's true, but a tarmac is the airport. So if you're running across the tarmac, you've got some serious problems.
I meant blacktop, but whatever. Shut up.
Words, they have meanings.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
That's an extreme example in a movie form.
Sure.
Of incorporating the senses of the reader. And since movie is a visual only, they have to have a way of pulling in feel, like he sees the temperature. They can't make you feel the heat that's out there. They can pull in the sound of all the cars honking. So they've got that, but they can't make you feel anything around you. They can't put taste in your mouth. They can't give you the scent. They can't give you smell, but they have workarounds where they can trigger certain visuals, will trigger those things in your head and make you feel something. It's like when you're writing a story, you can have the character walking through a square and smell a bakery, and that reminds that character of the taste of baked bread that they had as a child. And so you don't have to, if you're going to bring in five senses, taste is hard because you can't have them chewing on something every time they're in a scene. But you can have sense or any other feel bring back some memory of a taste. So that's one way to weave that in. But you've got to find, when you're writing the characters and putting them into the depth, you've got to find the little things that will pull the character in and make them associate with your character. They're not reading about someone, they're actually paying attention to someone.
Yeah, if I have a character, say the lovely scent of cordite, if you know what cordite is, that's one of the components of ammunition powder. You smell that immediately. That tang is there in your mouth. If I say that. Now, how the character reacts to the odor of cordite can get very interesting. If you've ever seen Apocalypse Now, that line the Robert Duvall gives, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning," that gives you so much insight into that character because it is not said ironically. That character absolutely freaking feels that way. And if a character says that ironically, that is a completely different view of how that character is colored and what they think about. So those little details can really get you in there and get you into the character's mind in a hell of a hurry.
Going through, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to my time when I was in the military. After basic training, they drill in basic training. They drill certain things into you. They break you down so that you're not an individual, and they build you back up again so that you are part of the team. And that's one of the aspects of basic training, and perhaps really the most important one, besides all the training on equipment and other things that you get there. When I got out of basic training, I remember walking at home near the post office, and a car backfired. And before I had time to even think about it, I had thrown myself to the sidewalk and rolled up next to a car.
Mm.
Because of all the training that they had given us, throwing grenade simulators to simulate incoming artillery rounds and the equivalent of just fake grenade bangs to make you react to that sound. And even though I knew I was not in any danger, I'm just walking around in a small town, that one sound instantly triggered a mindset in me that no one around me could understand why I was doing what I was doing. But it was my motivation.
Right.
It was part of my history that in that one moment of time illustrated who I was then in a way that was very graphic, a very immediate. And it's that kind of thing that I think is very important to remember. Your characters are all different people. They're all different in some way, and in something makes them be the way they are. You can't tell every bit of it, but you've got to keep it in mind as you're writing the story. You at least have to know it to a degree.
I personally am looking forward to telling more backstory of my Marines of SNR Black, because I think they're really interesting people, and I want to give some insight into their own motivations for why they are doing certain things, think certain things, or why they're going to do certain things in the future. So it's fun.
Well, it feels like we've danced all around this subject and really not dug into it, but we've talked for over an hour, I believe, about it. So we need to go ahead and drag ourselves to a close anyway. Any final thoughts, Paul?
Get to know your characters. Spend time with them. Don't be afraid of writing like 4 or 5 paragraphs about something that happened to them and then killing it later if it doesn't fit with that piece. Write it anyway. Don't be afraid to write it and excise it, because if nothing else, it's going to help you spend a lot more time with that character in your head and have a better way of actually showing the reader who they are.
I think that's good advice. Let's go ahead and pull this down. If you've got some commentary on this subject that we just did not cover, didn't even touch, go ahead and send us a note at show@deadrobotsociety.com. You can find Paul on Twitter at Paul_E_Cooley. You can find us on the Facebook at the Listeners of the Dead Robot Society Facebook group. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/DRS podcast. And of course, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/DRS podcast. And we must thank the good folks at podhoster.com who host all the audio episodes for your listening pleasure.
Indeed.
Let's have that list of $10 patrons, sir.
All righty.
I can't wait to hear what they've got for you this week.
Some of y'all took me seriously after the last Patreon episode, and how much I complained about this. So here we go. Our $10 patrons this week are Tracy Bodine, John Kilgallen, Robert Slade, Devin Lee, Caleb, back from a serious crack and hooker bender, James. We're glad you're back. Hope you had fun. There's penicillin at the pharmacy. Nathan, antimatter Petty. He complained on the Patreon group about my whatever that was, toy boat. He made me say last time. Anyway, Drew the Black versus Dinosaurs in Space Bernardi.
Sounds legit.
Chris Winder, Isabel Shadooby-Doo-Wah, Cushy, Andre Conde Moraes, DJ Chamberlain, Jonathan Zarusin, and J.R. Handley.
Thank you, folks, for supporting the podcast. It means a lot.
Yes, thank you.
And I guess the next time we're recording is going to be this weekend when we do the live show. Of course, by the time you hear this, the live show will have been over. Sorry you missed it. Oh.
Pobrecito.
So thanks again, folks, for tuning in. And we hope that we've at least given you something to think about. Say goodbye, Paul.
Usually it's just how terrible we are. Goodbye, Paul.
Goodbye.